Welcome back to the Composing Made Simple podcast. This is episode 14. And on today's podcast, we're going to talk about sample library basics using dynamic layers. And then we're going to go into sample library layering. And finally, we'll go into our picks of the week. So I hope you join us for this episode. So let's get on into it.
Composing Made Simple. We talk about something new every show. Composing Made Simple. Grab a coffee, have a seat, and let's go.
Hey, Curtis, how you doing, man?
Doing great.
Great.
Doing great.
So off the top, we just wanted to say that Chris will not be on this episode. He's at the Production Music Conference, so he could not join us. He's been out of town for the week, and last minute scheduling here, me and Curtis could just find the time to do this episode, so that's why he's not on. He will be back on the next episode, so just giving it out there. So anyway.
So, light a candle. For Chris, as you listen. And, not if you're in the car, though. Drive. Right. Pay attention.
He will be missed. But like we said, he just couldn't join it today. It's scheduling issues.
Yeah.
All right. So Curtis and me were discussing before the podcast what we wanted to talk about, since it's just me and him. And we thought we would go on dynamic layers with sample libraries. And, that's using, I guess you're saying, Curtis, let's break it down, like modulation, expression, and also
I feel like there's a lot of people talking about it right now with the release of so many big libraries. And I just think it's a kind of good thing to go over and something for people to be aware of and to understand.
Definitely. Especially if you're just getting started, because, I don't think I was really aware of it. And still to this day, sometimes I'm not, you know what I mean? Once you get into your rhythm and
exactly,
then it's just kind of a no-brainer. But yeah, I think it is one of those things that it's not talked about a lot or emphasized enough. I guess that's a good word or a good way to put it.
Well, I don't know if it's not even emphasized enough. It's like some people emphasize it and will talk about it in ways that I think maybe put too much emphasis on it for certain people, and then some. So let's talk about what dynamic layers are. So if you're sampling an instrument, let's say you're sampling a violin section, and you get, your 11 violins or 16 violins or whatever, 18, sitting in chairs, and you have them go through and start playing notes that you're going to sample. Depending on how you want to do that, you can sample them at a quiet dynamic, a medium dynamic, and a high dynamic, or maybe instead of 3 layers, you could do 5 of those. So you could do like a super, super soft, like a super pianissimo, pianissimo, piano, mezzo piano, mezzo forte, forte, fortissimo, forte, fortissimo, etc. Right? Tchaikovsky fortissimo, right on the other end. And so depending on how you want to approach the library, there might be a different number of dynamic layers. It's pretty common to see 3 dynamic layers to 5 dynamic layers.
Yeah.
I believe there are some sample libraries that are commercially available that have more. I know some people, I've seen some people say that a lot of the professional composers who have their own bespoke libraries that were created for them have significantly more. Somebody on VI Control the other day said that Hans Zimmer has 56 dynamic layers, in his library. So
he can do that, right? He can do that. He's got the money, and he's got people that come to his studio.
And I mean, it's also system resources. Right. If you have 56 dynamic layers, your library is going to be, 56 times larger than a library that only has 1, right? Or correct. However much larger than one that has 3 or 5. 10 times larger than one that has 5. So it depends. And in the process of playing back a sample, you press middle C on that violin patch, and what it's doing is it's looking at the way you played C. It's looking at how its dynamics are controlled depending on the library. This could be like a modulation controller, it could be an expression controller, it could be straight up velocity. It could be some bespoke MIDI controller 111 or whatever. You don't really know, and it's choosing one of those 3 layers to play that at. Now, depending on how the library is scripted, you also just have overall dynamics of how loud it plays back that sample, right?
Right.
So, you could play a sample that was recorded super loud, but you could then actually send a signal that is really low underneath that. And this is, I think, the approach that Spitfire uses. They do a little bit less dynamic layering. They record a few less layers, but then they, have a lot of control over the signal on it. So, I mean, when you're thinking about dynamic layers, the thing I think you need to be thinking about is balance. Because remember,
Yep.
56 dynamic layers doesn't come for free. It comes with, you need a more powerful machine to run it. It comes with, you need more hard drive space to store it on. It
Yep.
comes with, depending on how it's crossfading between those different dynamic layers, it could be kind of, I've heard some crossfading in certain libraries at certain times that is kind of wonky and sounds weird and unnatural.
Right.
So, there's trade-offs, and understanding what is actually happening under the hood, I think, is important, because when you're making those decisions, it's not just more layers is necessarily better, depending on your situation. So, when this came up a lot with the BBC library that Spitfire is getting ready to unleash upon the world soon, and a lot of people were saying, well, they'll probably only do 3 like normal, and some people were kind of sad about that, which, depending on your setup, that might be true. That might not be for you. But also, it's a 600 gig library for the entire,
Yeah, I know.
all the instruments of the orchestra. They're going to have to cut something. I
Right,
mean,
exactly.
unless you want it to be 600 terabytes.
Well, technically, it was 1.5 until they compressed it.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
And they there's another topic for some days, compression, audio compression,
Mhm.
and FLAC and versus MP3, blah blah blah. But yeah, I mean, so I just kind of wanted to kind of talk about that. What is your approach to dynamic layers, Todd? Do you like to have a lot of them? Do you have a little bit of them? Is it something you really, really care about?
Honestly, I don't really care about it. Because we're already limited. They're samples. Obviously, if you're Hans Zimmer, like you said, if you have access to solo instruments or these players that you can hire and bring into your studio and record them all day long, doing everything you want them to do, yeah, that's amazing. I wish I had that, but I don't. So I only got with what I'm giving. And, obviously, like you said, I think you hit all the points exactly. If you want a, 600 terabyte, sample library and you need a server farm, of computers to run all this stuff, most of us don't have that. So you kind of just have to, with whatever you're getting is master. Like I always say, and we've always said, you got to master your libraries, know them in and out, what they can and can't do, and then find libraries that will complement that library to do what you want. That's why I recommend using multiple libraries, but use them and don't just keep buying new ones. Because you're not gonna, what I mean. You're not really gonna master it until you get these things. Like using expression, modulation, CC1, CC11, and some other form of there. Those two are like crucial. You can sculpt your sound very, very good. Modulation obviously is like the dynamic layers, forte, all that stuff. And then the expression is kind of the volume level, if you want a soft part and, or you want it to taper off. That's the key there too, to get like passages to sound kind of real, is that taper at the end of a phrase. Definitely using expression works out really well. It's just, it's kind of like playing a musical instrument. Like it really is. I mean, obviously you're playing the piano, but you kind of have to treat it as its own, like sample libraries as their own instrument. It's really weird. I don't, I think of like that, but it really is. You got to master how to work all that stuff. Obviously, you can go in after the fact and draw curves and do all that stuff if you love that. But I've heard from professionals and everybody, it's better to do it on the fly as you're doing it. For me, it's a little difficult. Do you do that, Curtis? Or I know I've watched a lot of your live streams. I know you like to draw it in sometimes, but
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth. I mostly draw it in because it's a lot easier for me to control it very precisely.
Mm-hmm.
I know people say that Logic's MIDI controller interface isn't very good compared to Cubase's.
Right.
I don't know. I've never used Cubase. I think it's fine.
I'll give you a little tip, dude. When you go in the piano roll, go to the tab Step Editor. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
Dude, you could draw it in very specifically there. I don't think a lot of people know about that. I mean,
and I like doing it just in the regular piano roll, just because you can actually draw the curve, right? I like to draw the line and then I use the tool to curve it the way that I want.
Right.
That's just my workflow. Some people have a completely different workflow. I will occasionally record it in by hand, but not that often.
I don't either.
Actually. I find that I actually spend a lot more time messing with it later when I do that. So it actually takes me a lot longer to get in there. And so it's easier just to go in and draw it in and move on with my life.
Right.
But that's just my workflow. It just depends on what you're doing. I mean, I have a Nectar Impact. The faders aren't, the best in the world. They're not terrible. I've definitely used significantly worse. I know some people use those. What are those ones that are like the modular ones? They're like blocks that you can,
I have one. Yeah, palette
what
gear.
are those called?
Yeah, it's a palette gear.
Yeah.
They're actually releasing a new version that's incorporating, music. Because before this stuff was tailored to video editing and graphic design. Now, because they heard the outcry, everybody buying them. So now they redid it and it's coming out. They just launched the Kickstarter. So yeah, it's palette gear, but they changed their name. It's not palette gear anymore. I don't remember off the top of my head. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. I've heard those are really good. They look really nice.
They do.
Perhaps I would do more like editing like that. So the reason I don't input things usually by recording a fader, even a really nice fader like that, is because the actual data is really a pain in the butt to work with.
Yeah.
I like my expression controller, for example, to be, through a phrase, maybe like 5 actual points, and then I just bend the lines between them to my liking. Because I find that's a lot easier to move around. If I want to like lower it all by 10, I just grab it all and move it down. Right. Whereas if there's like 600 individual points in the line,
I hate that, dude. Oh, God,
yeah, it can get a little bit hard to go in and mess with it later. So that's why I don't do it. Again, maybe that's like a Logic sucks at this kind of editing thing.
No, I think you're onto something there, dude, because I've watched a lot of your streams. I know your workflow, and I actually adapt some of my workflow to yours because we think very similar in that sense. We're very easy. I guess not lazy, but you know what I mean. Like, we just want it simple. Keep it simple. Right. I don't need all this complex stuff. I just want to write the music. And I noticed that, and I think you're onto something the way you do your line drawing, because I mean, we don't need to get that. You know what I mean? Because if you think about a person, the way they breathe, the way they bow, it's kind of like that. It's very clean and simple. I mean, obviously, you can get very technical with it. We understand that. But, I always think of everything to the final mix. You're not going to hear it. You're really not. You know what I mean? Unless it's a solo passage, that's crucial. You might want to get more microscopic with it and detailed. But yeah, an overall mix, when you're piling on layers and layers of instruments, I don't think it's really going to matter. As long as you got the curves in there, you got the expression, you'll feel. It's more of a feel thing, I guess. What I tend to do in my workflow is I'll play the passage in, and then I'll go back, and then I'll just focus on, if I want to, then I'll do the move. I'll move the faders while it's recording, while it's playing. So then I can get the feel of, you know what I mean? Like actually swelling. It's like, that's kind of my workflow. Well, and
I find moving a fader is very hard for me to translate emotion into a fader. It's very hard. I've actually thought about, I know they make breath ones where you can like blow, and I think that would be really good if, depending on how good they are. I mean, I would need them to be very good, but I think that could be really good because that's more along the lines of how I think of it. And again, I'm a piano player and singer, so like air through my through my meat parts is like, how I'm used to increasing volume when I'm singing, and on the piano velocity, right? Like how hard I'm pushing, and neither of those right now, unless you have the aforementioned breath controllers, really translates well to faders. It's really hard for me to use faders. So even I think it would even be easier to just learn how to play like an electric violin and somehow get that bow pressure in. I don't know how you would even do it, but faders to me are not the way. I've seen other controllers. There's a controller that it looks like almost like a pedal. Have you seen this one? I get ads for it on the internet all the time, and it's it's got like you can put vibrato in with it and go up and down, and I could see that being good. Or even the Magic Leap, which is that one that can like see how far away your hand is from it. I could see that being really good because that's a little bit like conducting, I guess. The thing, faders to me have never really been it's not very easy for me to put expression into just moving something on one axis.
Understood. Like I said, it's like its own instrument in itself, dude. It's like you're learning a whole new instrument, how to do that. And like the thing about controllers is, I have one for guitar, the MIDI controller, And it's great if I'm a guitar player, but then it's like if the library isn't written for that guitar or that controller, it's useless, dude. Because I play like a guitar. I get the vibrato. I get the, you know what I mean? All those nuances a guitar
Sure.
player has is not going to come over through that library. And it's just, that's what I'm saying. Like, I just don't think we'll ever. I don't know. Technology will get there, but you know what I mean. Like, we're always going to be.
Well, I mean, things like these breath controllers, I think, are a good
Yeah,
step.
but you know what I mean.
I don't know.
It's
I think one thing has not solved. I think right now faders are it, but well, people have got a lot of cool ideas. I mean, even an
Yeah.
XY pad to me is a lot better. I used to have my iPad set up where I had an XY pad and up and down was expression and left and right was modulation. And that was really great for Hollywood Strings because in Hollywood Strings, the expression controller crossfades between the different dynamic layers.
Right.
And the modulation is is vibrato. So you could just do kind of both at the same time. And
Okay.
for a while I would record on that, but I haven't really been able to set it up in the same way ever since that software stopped working for me.
hmm
So I don't know.
It boils
it's a
down to
thing.
how the library's programmed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you just said, like you're at the mercy of that. So like if you find a company that programs exactly the way you think, use their libraries. Like you're so used to East West that it just works for you because you've mastered it, you've learned it, you know the nuances,
Sure,
you know
yeah.
everything. But I know you use other stuff too. But yeah,
Well,
I mean,
that's my base. That's what I always
Right.
start with, and then I sprinkle things in.
because you
which
know,
we'll talk
yeah,
about
because you
later.
know how that works, how it's going to respond,
Right.
how to get what you need out of it. How is that Rolly keyboard that the Rolly, right? That one that you got? Doesn't
Yeah,
that-
it's really cool. I got it because some synth libraries are
Mhm.
going to be, and it's really interesting. I would like to actually see that be able to control something like Hollywood Strings. It's not. It uses um, a standard called, I think it's MPE, multiple patch environment or something. I can't remember what it stands for, but basically every note is on a separate MIDI channel.
okay.
And this allows you to do things like you can play a C major chord and then you can like slide up to an F major chord and all the notes slide seamlessly from one to the next
Oh wow.
in a chord, right?
Yeah.
They all just are locked together because each one is on its own separate MIDI channel, so it can like send pitch bend data separately to each note. It also has like up and down. It's cool. I think it's always going to be a synth thing.
Mhm.
I've seen some people using the SWAM modeled
Yes,
strings
yes.
with it, and that's got some interesting stuff. I don't know. I have a really hard time. So imagine a keyboard and you press like C, like, and you're on the very tip of the note, like your finger's about to fall off the keyboard,
Yeah.
and then you push toward the fingerboard. That could be a controller. Now the problem with that is that if you bump into that like black note, right? That's between C and D, C sharp, D flat. It'll pitch bend because it thinks it's a pitch bend. It's all one surface. And so I haven't really figured out how to use it super effectively. It's really cool. It's a really neat product. I think it's always going to be for synths though,
Yeah.
just because portamento and pitch bend are just not a thing that most instruments do a lot of. So I don't know. I'm not convinced on its utility for stuff, but for synths, it is really cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I looked at that like when it first came out. I think they did a Kickstarter, didn't they? I
It's
think
a
they did.
beautiful piece of hardware. I mean, it is, the build quality on it is absolutely fantastic.
But then I
mean,
saw the price and I'm like,
it's-
"Ugh."
yeah, it's very expensive. to
Obviously,
boot,
you got
so-
the what? Is it the 25 or 49?
I got the 25. I
Yeah.
did not get one.
Yeah. Well, I know I saw the price on that. Like, yeah. So I
Yeah,
guess
like-
like for like just the side thing, you know, the 25 will work perfect. You know, if you're just
Yeah, I
doing
just
that
have it
stuff.
sitting on my
Yeah.
desk, and occasionally use it for certain synths. Again, I don't love the way that the MPE standard works. Really, it's not my favorite. I prefer to use MIDI channels for articulation, not for each note. That
Right.
seems like kind of weird. I mean, for what they want you to do with it, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know, if more sample libraries could have an MPE version, perhaps that is programmed to it, you would have to just start
Right.
and let the developer build it for you, because it's going to be a pain to go in and try and do it yourself.
That's the
But
thing.
no, I
Yeah.
could see it be really good. I could see it be
Well, you're at the mercy of developers. Like if they're not developing for that platform, it's useless.
Yeah.
And that's why I said like these controllers, they're great, but if nobody's developing or implementing in their libraries, you just got $300,
it's just-
$400
yeah,
piece
this
of
is-
nothing.
this is why I think about that breath controller should be good, because
Mhm.
it controls one thing. You just say,
Right.
I want this to be modulation. Done.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Move on.
MIDI channels is something I need to brush up on and get more familiar with. Yeah.
It's just a property on every note. Like every note can have a property of MIDI channel 1 to like 127 or 0 to 127. And that's how like the ski switcher arts ID stuff works. And even that's really how Logic's new articulation sets work.
Okay.
Is they basically, channel 1 is legato, right? And then a note channel 2 is staccato.
Right.
And that's a much better way to do articulations than even key switches, because you can have multiple articulations at once. You can have, it does. You don't have to like chase the key switches correctly, when you play it back, because the data is in the note itself.
Exactly.
Sort of, the way we've been writing music for thousands of years, where you just put a dot over the note and it's staccato, and you don't have to worry about like, oh, I didn't press C0 in the last measure,
Right.
I don't mind key switching as an interface. Like selecting from a menu using key switching is fine. I hate key switch patches where you have to like worry about everything following.
Exactly.
So the MIDI channel way is much better. I don't know. People are saying that Arts ID is out of date now that they have articulation sets, but I have not been able to make articulation sets work nearly as well as it. So
I haven't dove into it either. Yeah, I wanted to. I was going to test it out like on one library and just like make a set, see how it worked compared to like Cubase when I used to use expression maps, which I loved. Like I said, once Logic got expression maps, like I was like, okay, I'm going back to Logic. And what happened? They kind of got something similar. Obviously, they probably still need to refine it. I don't know. I'm not. I haven't messed with it yet, so I don't really know. I can't give a fair assessment. But, I mean, after that update that helped, alleviate your instances of things and takes them out of your RAM and all that, just kind of like Cubase disabled tracks, that was huge. And, I like I said, I went back to Logic, and I don't regret one bit. I like Logic. It works for me. I love the workflow. I mean, yeah, there's some things I wish they had, but it works for me, and I don't have to. It comes down to like I said, I'm one of those people. I just want to write the music. I don't want to worry about all this stuff, like because if you have an idea and you're monkeying around with something, it's gone.
Well, and the dream, to me is something like Note Performer, where I don't care what happens on the back end. I don't care. I put a dot over the note and you play staccato. Just.
Well, there we go, Curtis.
Even Spitfire's performance patches, where you can, I don't know if you saw the BBC walkthrough, but they're using the performance scripts for their strings, it seems. Cool. And so when you play a short note, guess what it does? It plays a shorter sample. Like by itself. Like I don't understand why it is 2020 almost. Yeah. I know it's 19, but we're almost to 2020, and that's still like a basic feature of musicianship that has not been emulated in samples to me.
Do you have any performance samples libraries? The ones that you like that? I love that. It's just like when I tried to use them in my stuff, like it was very hard to get it to work. But the concept of just playing the keyboard and it does, it triggers what I need. Yeah, that's awesome. Now we need to refine that. Yeah,
exactly. And you could use key switches or whatever to select pizzicato later, or some weird articulation, or
I guess it comes like you're saying. It comes down to like writing on a paper. I think people like usually sketch it out and then they just input that data in their computer. But a lot of us don't do that. We actually play it in, as we're writing. So I think that's where that stuff comes from. Composers like you would have went into Sibelius or Finale or whatever, mocked up your thing, and then after you were done, you went back into your DAW and then just inputted everything because it's already written. But a lot of us don't do that. So I think that's where the struggle comes from. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I mean, even for me, it'd be nice to be able to sketch with a cello patch, right, that actually responds to me as a cello would, like, it relates to, again, if they can just get, like, legato, staccato, and long chords figured out, I mean, you're 90% of the way there. Like, if I play a D minor chord on a cello patch, you should auto switch to a long Divisi patch that divides the cellos up into thirds for me and just plays, 3 separate patches when I play that chord. If I play a C just really short, you should just play the spiccato patch or whatever. If I'm playing a very connected passage, you should play legato. Like, I know this is really hard to do, and it's hard to do fast because you have to do it so fast that I don't notice that it's happening in between when I actually input the notes and when I hear them. but it's 2019. I think we can do it. This is people say sample libraries we're done with sample libraries. We don't need any more. I'm like, no, we need a sample library that can do this.
Right. We just need to innovate more on the scripting and programming, and the sounds are there. Like like I said, when I heard that BBC it was on the live stream, and they played that piece. I swear, like there was seconds there. I thought, is this a real orchestra? Because like
I think it's the spill mics. I think that's a huge thing. I really do.
So it's not the sound; it's the scripting and the way it.
Yes.
Yeah. How it.
Well, did
operates.
you see? They posted a video that kind of shows you the I mean, he didn't do it in Logic. He did in DP, but they imported the session into Logic, and so you can see. Look at his tempo track. It's not just a straight line. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Look at his MIDI controllers. They're all over the place all the time. That's why his faders are at 0, right? The whole time.
Yep.
Because he's just using the built-in stuff. So anyway.
That's the secret, like what we're talking about, dynamic layers.
Exactly,
I mean,
dynamic
that's
layers,
the secret.
right, yeah.
You shouldn't have to touch a fader. It's because you're going to be doing it with expression anyway. That's your fader. And that's the key. And and a tempo, making that tempo move. You'd be surprised how much more feeling that gives your track. Not just keeping it on a steady beat, but kind of drawing.
I mean, sometimes you have to do that because it's for like a click track or whatever. But if you wanna, if it's gonna stay in MIDI. Go hog wild with that. Put tempo ramps everywhere.
My dream is I just hook a computer up to my brain and I think it and it will do it. That's the dream for me. I just think what I'm hearing in my head, the music, and it just writes itself.
Orchestrates it out for you. Yeah, nice.
Dude, that would. Oh God. But we'll get there someday when we're living in the Matrix.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of a little bit of a rabbit hole, but that's kind of like where dynamic layers goes, I guess, with all that we're talking about is just going to this level of just like you don't have to deal with it. And I guess to end, I would end with when you're looking at a library and trying to decide how many dynamic layers, think about the instrument that they're sampling. I think certain instruments need more than others.
Yes.
If you think about the way like a horn. For example, if you play really soft and really loud, like the tone color is hugely different, and there's a massive spectrum of tone color. So I think in the case of brass, there's definitely a case to be made for more dynamic layers. On strings, I think maybe a little bit less so. I mean, there's a definite tone color shift when you play a cello section playing, Tchaikovsky forte versus Tchaikovsky piano, right? There's a huge difference, but it's not quite as dramatic.
Right. As a horn. Because you get that break up and that you know what I mean?
Brassy,
that bite. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, it's different. So, I mean, consider that too, depending on what you're buying. So,
Same with woodwinds too, right? I mean, it's kind of similar to strings, but they're very delicate. So, I mean, but as far as, I guess if you do a flute or a piccolo like really high, it would have a breakup too, I guess. But
I would say certain winds do. I think flutes and piccolos maybe a little bit less so. Again, when I say they less so, I don't mean that there is no difference. I mean that it's a little bit less dramatic than like a clarinet. I think has a significant.
The reed instruments,
all the reed instruments, double reeds, single reeds, all of them, bassoons,
that honky thing, yeah. But yeah, definitely brass.
What is the one that everyone's all mad about at BBC? Oh, the bass flute. That's right. Yeah, that doesn't really change. It's pretty static all the way through. The bass flutes are beautiful though. I mean, bass flutes are some of the.
I'll have to watch that video.
Yeah. If you want a really great bass flute, I actually saw Daniel James post something about this. I was thinking the exact same thing. If you want a great example of bass flute, go look up the Journey soundtrack by Austin Wintory. He uses bass flute, and it is. I mean, just chef's kiss. Just beautiful.
It's great. Yeah, I have it. Yeah, it's great. And percussion. We can't. Percussion needs a lot of dynamic because that new percussion library was it LA percussion or whatever.
Yes, significant amounts of dynamic.
I love how they do that, and I wish more libraries
percussion,
did that.
Especially unpitched percussion, is a great. It's a place where you can have a lot of dynamic layers, right? Because you can hit the drum. But you can't change the pitch of the drum that much, right? Like depending on what drum it is, right? If it's timpani or whatever, it could be different. But you mean so you can get more in-depth sampling by having more dynamic layers, versus where if you're talking about like a piano, you've got 88 notes to sample more if it's a Bosendorfer, right? So that's a whole another can of worms. But yeah, dynamic layers are cool. You should use them. You should care about them.
And learn about them and
learn about them and understand where it's going to matter and where it's not.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and if you're ever curious to see Curtis's workflow, just head to his YouTube channel. He has a bunch of live streams on there, and you can see what he was talking about when he draws in his MIDI data and stuff. I started using that approach too. Like I said, I was watching Curtis's videos way before I even met Curtis. Before we started the podcast and everything like that, and that's how I became a fan of his music. And one day I just reached out to him, to do an interview on YouTube, and that's how we met, and the rest is history. So. Yeah, I found Curtis years ago. Definitely, there was East-West stuff when I got the East-West stuff I was searching for.
Yeah. Well,
so yeah.
I mean, because that's what I use.
Yeah,
that's all I used in the beginning.
Right.
I mean, I finished off my East-West Orchestra before I bought any more orchestra samples.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a complete set of the Hollywood series, which at the time was less me waiting, trying to scrounge up the money and more like waiting for East-West to finish it. It took
back then it was expensive, dude. But I'm just saying, like, there goes to anybody. Just listen to, pretty much everything that Curtis has done professionally was East-West stuff, like strings, all that stuff, Hollywood Orchestra. And that's why I'm saying, like, if you love what he did with that and you don't think it's sample, you know what I'm saying? Like, it can be done. It doesn't matter the library, man. It's just how to use them and using these things. It's very important.
I mean, excuse me. I don't want people to think that there aren't libraries that aren't good for them. I mean, that's true. There are sometimes libraries that aren't good for you and good for your setup
or your workflow.
Whatever.
Yeah,
but it's not that. It's not as much of a deal as the drama on the internet often makes you feel.
Well, we're just
if you own, Cine whatever, great. And you love it, great.
It don't matter, man. Like we're just in that culture right now where everybody's outraged about everything, dude. Movies, music. Right. It's just like
and it's also, I think there's like this like weird like fanboy level stuff where like if people need to like if I'm not like this, but if I were like that, I would be like, for East-West to win, Spitfire needs to lose. But that's not true. Everybody can win.
Right.
It's not a zero-sum game here. So, just use what makes the most sense for you and kind of ignore the drama. I see a lot of people on the internet, for example, crapping on Hollywood woodwinds. And I would actually agree that it's not as intuitive and out of the box easy to use as, say, Hollywood strings. But it's still good. It's still great. And if you just sit down with it and actually learn it, it can be really good.
All right. Well, do you want to move on to we're going to tie into a sample library layering, which is another secret, I guess, of this thing, which is something that I came to kind of late. Like I said, I keep it simple, man. I try to master the one library, and that's what I'm going with. But I think professionally and what we hear, in scores, and if it is all samples, like the trick is multiple sample libraries giving you that unique sound. It's kind of like I'm going to relate it to guitar because, everyone has an amp, but then how the way you use the amp, the way you play, obviously there's all those things in there, but that's why people use effects, kind of things. But and when guitar players record their guitar, they are layering different amps with their one main amp. So this is nothing new, and so everything you hear on a final finished recording is been faked. Not fake, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, like, when you see a band live, what they play live is not what they're using in the studio. They're using multiple, that's what I'm saying. So it's like there's production involved here. So it's very important, but go ahead, man. I don't want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're talking about sample library layering, the first thing a myth that I think needs to be maybe addressed and dispelled here is, so one of the things you'll hear a lot is like, so if I take a section from, say, East-West, and it's the 11 violins second violin patch, and I layer that in with, say, a 24 violin patch from Adio or whatever, people will say, well, now it's like 40 violins or 36 whatever it is violins playing, and that's true, but it's one of those things that it's a fact that the signal is made up of that many violins, but that's not actually what it sounds like.
Right.
And that's a big myth, I think.
I fell for that too, man. Like when I first started.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's more true in things like if you have like a 12 horn patch and you play a massive chord, I think that buildup can be significant. But even in that sense, that's not really true. It doesn't sound the same as if you had, you'll see 12 horns, say 3 notes. That's not 30. It doesn't sound the same as if you had recorded 36 horns. It just doesn't. because of just the way the sampling works and because of the way that we listen to orchestral music. I mean, when you listen to a score that's been recorded by a real orchestra, you are hearing multiple mic signals. You are hearing close mics, you're hearing room mics, you're hearing outriggers, mics that are way far away. I mean, the amount of mics that they use to record, especially modern stuff, is just, I mean, it's enormous. It's a huge array.
Look at Spitfire, 50 mic per position.
Exactly. And I know some people make fun of them for that, but I actually love the mic position. I've come around on that. I was very against that.
I did with Eric Whitaker choirs. Like, I'm like, I get it. Yep.
Well, and I get why they do that instead of 56 dynamic layers. Why they have 20 mics instead of 56 dynamic layers? Because 20 mics you can change the sound significantly more. But anyway, so when you talk about layering libraries, you're essentially doing the same thing. You're adding detail to the signal, right? Like you're just adding a little bit of something differently. And the way I layer libraries, what I will do is so my favorite thing to do with strings right now, this is how my current template is loaded when I load up my full work template. It is east-west, mains, and closes, and then I load the 8-DO century strings, their outriggers and ambient. So I take different mics. It's not like I'm loading just close from both libraries. I load different mics, and what that does is it creates a sound that's kind of a composite, and it's got a little bit more detail because it's got both in them. The other thing you can do is mix soloists in with strings, especially that really can add that detail. Even DVC patches that are maybe like half the string section can really suddenly just bring detail into it that wasn't there before. Just all sorts of things. And strings especially, layering I think is really good. And like I said, in my current template, I layer east-west and 8-DO century together, mostly only on the legatos. On the staccatos, I find, and spiccatos, I find it's easier just to use different mic signals from one library, and it saves me on some resources. But you know what? I would if I could. if I wasn't at like 96% RAM usage after loading all the legatos.
We should say that, Curtis. When you start doing this, your RAM usage is gonna is gonna go, especially with mics.
It's gonna go up.
Yeah,
it's gonna especially with big patches like legato patches. If you're talking about like a long, you can probably get away with some. Well, and that's another thing you do is you can mix articulations. You can take the east-west legato and the 8-DO longs, right? Maybe save you on some system resources. Same thing. It's still adding detail, and you just play with it. Put it through some reverb to kind of glue it together. And you could even take a wet library like Spitfire and mix it in with a dry library. I saw this tip on VI Control. I don't personally do this because I always start with a very dry library. That's why I like 8-DO and East-West for strings, because they're both pretty dry to start with. But you can start with a wet library. And there was a trick. Did you see this trick on VI Control? It was like I should look it up before I give it, but it was like putting them through different kinds of reverb, and it just glues it together, even though one of them is wet and one of them is dry.
No, I haven't. Go look for that, and cool. I'll tell them my workflow. And then
Here's you tell them about your workflow.
Yeah. So like I'm similar to Curtis, but what I do is I use the ensemble patch. So right now my bread and butter string library is Spitfire, the orchestra package, whatever. They're strings, winds, and all that. So that's my bread and butter for all my instruments. And then when I kind of like with Curtis, I'll do a long, and then I'll maybe do the ensemble patch as well. So I have like full ensemble doing the chords or whatever I'm doing, and then I just layer from there. And when it comes to where it gets tricky for me is like brass and stuff. When I start layering too many of those, like it just gets too loud. Or just, you know what I mean? You got to find the ones that
brass is hard. Yeah. You kind of got to work with soloists and brass, I think, to really mix them.
Or find libraries that complement each other tone-wise.
Right.
Like say, like Cinesamples is very like crisp and bright, that Hollywood 80s, John Williams-y kind of thing. And then like Spitfire is more, not as bright as Attack, you know what I mean? So like they kind of go together.
It's more English.
Definitely. There you go. It's more English.
It is. I was shocked. I couldn't believe how I was listening to this, and I was like, oh, it's just English. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, that
it's like
it's
the
true,
kind
man.
of library you'd pick to do like a Finzi mock-up, right? Like,
Like their British drama library is amazing. I love it. The sound, and like if you're especially going for that intimate, kind of thing, works perfect. Drama, it really grabs you like that because it's got that tone. And then like some other tricks is just like things that you wouldn't think about. it's like what Curtis said is like, layering it with soloists and stuff. It's like, think of it, the way I think about this stuff is it's like an orchestra, and you have different players, in the section, so they're all going to play differently, all have different tone with their violin, so it's all coming together to make that great sound that we love. So kind of use that principle with the way you're doing it with samples. Mix and match, find the ones that complement each other. We're already breaking the rules here. Don't think like you were saying with the 12 horns, 50, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, some things you can't layer too much, but we're already throwing realism out the window when you're using samples. Obviously, if you're writing for an orchestra, like this piece is going to get played, be a little more worried of it, but most of what we're doing is not going to.
But even then, I would say like library layering is not, excuse me, really going to change that unless you're unless you're pulling like, so the places where you need to be careful with that are where you're taking something and you're doing something unnatural to it, which can
horns
sound
and
really
woodwinds, like a flute's overpowering 12 horns.
Right. Like if you're doing like, if you're changing a dynamic in such a way, or like even like like Albion 5, like the Tundra one, which has these like just gorgeous, like, what is it called? Sultasto on over the fingerboard things. Like you can never get that loud enough to actually speak in a real performance. Like it's just really, really quiet. But with samples, you can do really cool stuff. You can turn it up and amplify it, and that makes it really good. That's the place where like if this is going to a real orchestra, you need to be like really careful that this is not going to get swallowed up. So I did find that trick with the reverbs. Okay. This is from Bass Clef on VI Control. He says, a tip I learned from Jake Jackson. Pick 2 reverbs, 1 algorithmic and 1 convolution. So
I've heard this.
Like a sample-based IR-based library like QL Spaces, and 1 algorithmic like a Valhalla or I think Seventh Heaven is algorithmic as well, right?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Something that doesn't use a sample of a room, right? That's just so chrome reverb or something. Right. Give plenty of those to your dry samples, and then give a little of those same 2 reverbs to the already wet samples. And what will happen is it'll just sound the same. It'll sound like they're in the same space. So you can do that, and it'll suck your instruments together and make them sound like they actually live in the same space, instead of sounding like they were recorded, one on Mars and one on the moon or whatever.
Production.
Man. I mean, I always start with dry samples for this reason, because I think it's a lot easier to just send a bunch of dry samples through the same reverb.
Or if you have reverbs, like turn them all off when you're composing, and then turn them on after you're done. Yeah.
Right.
I can't do that. I have to hear that reverb, man, because it gives me the feel. You know what I mean? It just gets me in there and how it's gonna sound. I like I said, I try to keep all this simple, man. I don't try to complex it, because when you start throwing all these, it's like then I start focusing on that more than the music, and then I'm working on a piece for 3 months. That's just me. I don't have deadlines like you do.
Yeah, well, this is why I like to work in a template, because I can do all that while I'm building the template, and then I can benefit from it when I'm actually composing and not worry about that.
Kind of just forget about it. Yeah, it's already there.
That's why I work from a template. Other people don't work from a template. I saw Sarah Schachner was tweeting and was getting retweeted by a bunch of composers I follow. Like, what'd she say? She said like bringing a huge orchestral template to a new project is like bringing all your emotional baggage to a new relationship. Blank templates for the win or something. And I was like, that's kind of true. I mean, and I used to work without a template, but I got tired of doing the same 90% of loading every time.
Yeah. No,
I got tired of loading the legato strings every single time.
What pisses me off is like you have a template for so long, then all of a sudden you're doing a newer track, so you have to add these instruments in, and you do, and then you go back to the older projects and they're not there, and you're so used to having them there. You're like, damn it.
I just keep a rolling template. I mean, I don't build one template and then only use that. Like my template, I've actually started as I update it, giving it a version number, and I just update it as I go. And again, this is, I mean, Vienna, that's pretty easy to do. Yeah. I guess it's pretty easy to do without Vienna too, now that I think about it. But yeah, that's what I do is have like my current template is like, main template version. And I use like, September 2019 version 919. And then if I update it, it becomes, maybe next month it'll become 1019. Yeah. And that's a good way to kind of change it up and spice it up. I don't know. I just got really tired. I hate duplication of effort. I hated loading up a blank template and being like, oh, well, let's load up all the legato strings before we get started because I know I'm
Yeah.
going to use them.
Right.
Like, why am I doing this?
No, I work from a template. Mine's about 400 tracks now. Like it's grown significantly since I did my last video. But another tip I wanted to give, because we're just talking about alternative, is like in Logic, somebody asked in our Discord about project alternatives. So let's say you're working on an idea,
Yes.
and then you do something else. You could save it as a different alternative, and then but you still have the original thought that you had. So if you're like, hey, let me try this, but I don't want to ruin what I had before, you can do an alternative. So it is there. You just go to File, Project Alternatives, and New Alternative. That's all. Cool thing. Because somebody
It's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't using it a whole lot either. I actually just started using it this year. I was always I think it's been in there for a while, if not forever. And I'd always seen it. I'd heard of it before, and I didn't want to. I don't know. It always seemed just safer to me to just duplicate the project if I was making a new version. And when you work with clients, oftentimes they're asking you to revert back to draft 2 or whatever for something. So you got to keep that stuff around, like never delete anything ever, ever, ever. But with the project alternatives, I started using them. I decided to try them out. And the big savings that I got was that it saves disk space because my Logic projects are huge.
Yeah.
Like my template is like 2 gig, like just the file. It's not the samples. It's just the file because it's all of the Vienna data I think that saves with the project. So it's huge. So duplicating that, it's 4 gig, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I just use a project alternative, maybe it goes from 2.1 gig to 2.2 gig or whatever. So it's a big disk saver, which on Apple machines is super happy. I need to get an external SSD like array for saving stuff. I'm running out of my internal, but yeah, it's a really great feature. And in terms of library layering, you could actually like have 2 alternatives of your template, one that's layered in one way and one that's layered in another way. And it could like just dynamically load up new layers, right? Like you could have your Spitfire version and your East-West version and your ATO version and your hybrid version and your classical version. And, you could do really cool stuff with templates with those too, I think. So,
yeah, another like little tip is like using synths like very low in your mix, like that.
Yes.
You'd be surprised how many people do that, and you would never even know.
Yes.
Yeah, it gives you
the
more
sign trick. Yeah.
Or just like layering like a synth pad or something that you wouldn't hear. Just turn it really low in the mix, put some reverb on it, and just to give that,
Yeah, like fills in the cracks.
Yeah, texture. Yeah, basically. Yeah. A lot of people do that. I'm starting to do that more. Since I got Signal and Substance. Dude, Output, man, I love their stuff. They just released the Signal cart for the desk.
Oh yeah, I saw they have new furniture. I was looking at those monitor stands.
Oh yeah,
monitor stands are really pretty. My monitor stands are so
eventually I'm
ugly.
gonna get that desk, dude. I mean, it's on my list of things.
I love this desk. Yeah. I love it so much. It's one of my favorite things. It's a little tall, so if you're the sort of person who doesn't like your monitors up high, think about that. Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely
on my list. Eventually, I'll get that. But yeah, definitely love their stuff. I have Arcade, Substance, Signal, and really enjoying them. They're really cool and they're very good idea sparkers for me. And of course, Omnisphere. The more and more I use that freaking thing, man, the more I just like, oh god, it's so beautiful.
Omnisphere is amazing.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. If you don't have it, don't buy any more libraries, save up money, and buy it immediately.
Well, and the amount of free updates they keep giving to it. I mean, they could have easily charged for 2.6, called it 3, and raked in, I mean,
I think I bought
$2 million, but they decided to just update it, I guess. I don't know.
I can't remember if I bought Omnisphere 1 or 2, because I got it in the box, dude. We're talking years.
And I had used Omnisphere, like, when I first learned how to, like, program MIDI, like, back in college, like, on an Aqua Mac Pro, right? Like, with like the old remember the clear monitor, with, like the clear plastic, which at the time just seemed so cool. It was so cool. So it's now old fart with Todd and Curtis time.
Retro.
But yeah, I used Omnisphere back then. It must have been Omnisphere 1, and it was real good. That was back when I used to use Reason for my strings.
Oh, jeez. Yeah,
those were good string samples back in the day.
That was the first DAW I ever used, was Reason.
I remember, it was like built into the DAW, so you couldn't use their samples unless you rewired their DAW into whatever DAW
you can and you couldn't record audio. You could just record their stuff. That was it. Yeah, you had to export it and bring it in. And then I got Logic. back when it was in a box 10 years ago, actually. Yeah, Logic 9 when they
I
released.
still have my Logic 9.
Me
My
too.
Logic Studio. I bought Logic Studio.
Yep.
With my first iMac. Yeah.
Yep, that's what I got. Logic Studio in the box. Still have it to this day. Went to the Apple Store and had to buy it. Had to go to the Apple Store to buy it.
I bought it on Apple.com.
Oh, yeah. And then now it's like, dude, you just for $200, you go online, buy it, bam, download it, and you're up and running. Full-fledged doll, dude. Actually, somebody in our Discord, he just joined, but I've known him for like 2 years through VI Control Discord channel. Xavier, if you're listening, what's up? And he just switched to Logic, dude. He was using Cubase, and he just came back to Logic. And he was like messaging me on Discord privately. He's like, I love it, because they did the new update. He did the trial version, or so. He had an older version on, and he's like, okay. And then once he got the newest version, he's like, oh yeah, I love it. I was like, I told you. That's why I went back.
Hey, let's add one more topic. Let's add that Spitfire template where. Yeah,
go ahead, man. Start going.
Spitfire
I think we're good with sample. I mean, basically, what it comes down to layering is like experiment, have fun with it. Don't get into that trap of like, oh, I can't. It's 60,000 horns. It's like, dude, we're using samples. We're already breaking the rules. Unless, like we've already talked about, if you're writing for symphony and this is going to go to that, don't get married to the sound because it will sound different.
In that case, I would suggest just buy Dorico or Sibelius or Finale and write it out, and don't. If you need the MIDI playback, maybe Note Performer. Note Performer is an excellent. Right. It will show you how it's gonna, like how the balance is gonna be. It will show you mostly how it's gonna sound. It gives you a really good idea of the rough sound of it.
Or balance your template. I don't really do that because it gets very because it never gets in balance. Because you're always adjusting it. But like what I know some people do is before the track starts on every track they put CC data and expression data, so it starts at that level or whatever. Right? I think. That's what people do, but I tried doing that, and I just found it just to be too. It just didn't work for me. So
yeah, it's not worth it to me either because I'm gonna go put in other data later anyway. So it's like, why do I do
one
this?
Would be up high, one would be over here, and then it wouldn't play right. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on? And so I just got away from that. And like I said, I use similar to your workflow. I will record the passage of the melody or whatever I'm doing, and then I'll go back in and then move the faders myself, or I just draw it in. Yeah, that's what I like Logic for. Is like I can just hit the points, like 3 points, boom, move it, and I'm done. But all right, I think we've talked about that enough. So our last topic, Spitfire Template. So what's up with this? I haven't seen this, so I don't know.
So I downloaded it. I'm sad you haven't seen it. You should download it and just open it up. It doesn't have any samples in it. It's just it's all audio routed.
Nice.
It's got all of these beautiful sends set up for all your reverbs, and of course, it's just the built-in Logic reverbs. It's not, you don't need to own any specific reverb.
But I guess
product.
you can put your own in there, but it's all set up for you to go. Cool.
And it's all set up to print stems. It's all set up to you can print your stems with or without the reverbs, with or without your automation, all that stuff. It's got all the groups set up for you. It's actually really great. I would suggest this to people who want to learn Logic. Like, just open this up and look at what they did, because there's features in Logic that even I knew existed but like never really used, that they use in here, and you're like, oh, that's a good use of that. That's really good. So it's really good. I would really highly recommend people get into this and take a look at it and just look. It's very hard to look at the beginning, but just know there's no instrument tracks at all. It's all where you're going to send. The template is where you're going to send those instruments. Okay. And what they're going to do is when BBCSO releases, they'll have a version with all those patches loaded in for you, that route to the correct thing, and that'll even be better if you own BBCSO to kind of look and see what they do, because it's a great sort of masterclass in Logic and how to use it. So I just wanted to kind of throw it out there as like as a topic to maybe hey,
if you do use Logic, or even if you do, well, I guess if you don't have Logic,
if you own Logic and you can open it, I mean, look at it and just see what they did. It's got some pretty cool stuff in it.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check it out. Do they have track stacks? Is that how they're doing the sections, or how
they're doing some track stacks? They're also using Logic's groups function, which I never use.
Oh, wow,
I don't know how to use it. Yeah, I know. It's like, they have groups. Oh, like Pro Tools? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
So
see, we're still learning, and I've been using Logic for 10 years.
Because I don't use anything I don't need.
Right.
So if I don't need groups, I don't go look it out. I mean, I knew it had groups, but it's like I don't need this, so I'm not going to use it. But it's nice to see it, and sometimes I'm wrong. So, stuff like that is fun to sort of discover.
Well, you just get so used to your own workflow, and you just don't ever want to exchange. It's like, this works for me, so it works. And then,
well, I mean, I've never had my reverbs, for example, on sends. I always
that's
just
how I
did
do it.
Manually, but I just recently put them on sends because I was like, yeah, this is better.
The only thing though about I've noticed when I do sends, it makes the track a little bit louder if you have it full blast.
Well,
so,
what you need to do is, at least, I don't know what reverb you use mostly.
QL.
QL, there's an option in the preferences to operate as send by default, and it'll actually kill the dry signal. So you don't have to turn the dry signal all the way down. That's probably why you're getting that summing.
That's probably it.
Because your dry signal should actually be at 0 when it's on a send. Because otherwise you're just sending the same signal back to itself, on top of itself. Which, again, was another thing I had never really thought about, because I'd never used reverb sends because I just always used busing and used sort of the quote-unquote send in the plugin, right?
Yeah.
Because you can effectively do the exact same thing. The problem is that now that bus, unless you're sending each instrument to a bus, it's hard to get your stems isolated down.
Okay.
It's a really easy way to sort of get a really good MIDI mix, which is why I've always done it. Obviously now I'm in the point of my career where I'm having to send people stems, and it was getting really irritating having to manually bounce every instrument.
I bet, dude. Oh man. Yeah, that's another weak spot for me too. Is that stuff, because I never really worried about it. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely take a look at that.
Yeah, I would actually, and this is another sort of just random tip. Start getting used to exporting at least stem groups, high strings, low strings, sections,
okay, yeah,
all that stuff. I would, even if you don't use it, I would set it up now, and I would bounce them for every project you do, because you never know. Someone might come back and be like, hey, we want to use this in blah, blah, blah. Do you have stems? And it's going to be a pain to go back and do that if you weren't thinking about it before. So life pro tip. You never know when someone might want to pay you to use your music and need some stems. So get it ready now. It's a lot easier to do it before than later. So think about it.
Cool. No, definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna take a look at that.
I just had a library ask me to use a piece, and they're like, and we always offer stems, and I'm like, can't do stems for that. It's just, it will never happen. So I had to write them another piece, which is great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but it would have been really cool if I could have just been like, oh, yep, I print them as I go. Here it is.
So is there a link to that Spitfire template?
Yeah, there is.
Okay, we'll put it in the show notes.
We'll put it in the show notes. They've got a YouTube video where they kind of walk you through it, not really.
Okay. Maybe
they've sort of had a couple of other. They've had a series of videos sort of hyping it Spitfire. But it's cool. It's not very big actually, because it has no instrument tracks in it, right. So it's 2 megabytes.
I just hope Spitfire in the near future turns all their libraries into their engine. I do like it. I don't
think they're going to.
You don't think so? I think they will.
Nope. I think they've said they're not going to.
Really?
Yeah.
Because they could save them so much money. They don't have to pay the license.
Yeah.
And then they can tweak it and make it work exactly the way they want. I don't know. I know a lot of people would be upset, but just from using Eric Whitaker library, and I've used the Spitfire
I much prefer their player to Contact.
I love their player.
I've never liked Contact that much. I've always found it very weird that people love Contact a lot. Again, if Contact works for your workflow, just ignore what I'm saying.
It's a tweaker thing. I think people that like to tweak.
I know
we're
Davey
not that,
James
dude.
Really likes
we're not that people. We don't like that stuff.
The Contact works, but that's not how I work.
I just want to work right out of the box and use it, and I'm just simple like that. I don't need all this complex stuff, because then I start worrying more about that than what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
it distracts me, because I'm like, ooh, I'm supposed to write this piece, but hey, I can go under the hood and do all this, and then I just wasted 2 hours that I could have been writing music.
Right.
So that's just for my purposes, I guess. But yeah, cool. I think we had a cool show. I think that's it for that. We just wanted to mention that. So I guess we can move on to our picks of the month.
let's move on to our picks of the week. Todd, what is your pick of the podcast of the month?
Yeah.
What is your pick of the podcast of the month, of the week, of the day?
Of whatever we're doing. So I was on VI Control and I saw this post on there, the commercial developer samples. I think it was in the second. They have 2 tiers. I think it was in the second tier. So this is like an indie developer, a guy just getting started. It's called Lekko, Lekko. So it's like a soft piano, similar to, I would say, like, Spitfire's Lab soft piano, or the Oliver Arnold's piano. That kind of, what would you call that? Like plucked piano, I guess, or just
felt piano.
Felt piano. There you go, felt piano. So it's in that thing, but I think it has a little different edge to it because I think it's more geared. I think the guy was working on like an ambient album and he created this instrument for himself. So like when you hold down, let's say you hold down a C chord and you just keep it hold on, it's like granular. It kind of just keeps going and morphing as it goes along. So I think if you're looking for a felt piano, I think the price, I got it on introductory price, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. I'll put it in the show notes. I think it's like less than $50 or something like that. But I thought it was cool and, just like a new thing. Obviously, there's so many piano libraries out there, but I thought, we should start supporting indie developers because sometimes that's where the best things come out of because, they're not tied to anybody or anything. So they can kind of go deep with it and stuff. He just released a new version 1.1, because a lot of people were asking, I think, like pedal noise. There was a lot of pedal noise in there, and a lot of people didn't like that. So I think he's adding a switch to turn that off. So if you want it, you can. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And with that stuff, like with indie developers, that stuff happens. You can do that right away because, they want to sell libraries, and if they have the time, they'll do it. So I think it's called Lekko, and he has a free sample library that's based off Lekko. It's like so you want to try it out before you buy it. I'll have the link in there, but I thought I'd just shine some light on there. It's somebody on VI that's just getting started in the sample libraries, and it was very cheap, and I was like, hey, why not? I can always use another piano library. I haven't used it in a piece yet. I'm trying to find somewhere where I could use it. If I do, maybe I'll do I want to do a walkthrough video on my YouTube channel. I just haven't had the time yet, so look for that on my YouTube. It's just youtube.com/ToddKidwards. But that's my pick. How about you, Curtis?
My pick of the week is Kramer Master Tape from, I
Waves?
believe, Waves.
Yeah, it's Waves.
Yeah, it's just a tape saturation plugin I found. Heard some I was looking for something. I had some synth in something that needed to be just a little bit more analog sounding, a little bit more warmer with like just a little bit of tape saturation. And so I kind of did some research into what my options were, and I kept seeing this come up as like the tape plugin if you needed a tape plugin, and it is lovely. The interface is a little bit overwrought, like it's got moving tape heads in the little which I don't why just make it. So I love the Spitfire player because it doesn't, it's just
clean
buttons and knobs. It's not, I don't need a picture of the instrument. I know what a violin looks like, right? Or I know what a tape deck looks like. Anyway, so on that front, it's maybe a little bit overwrought in its design, but it sounds gorgeous. Great. And the levels of control that you have over it are pretty unique from what I've seen. And it apparently mimics an old reel-to-reel system and models it, which is pretty cool to be able to get that kind of sound digitally, even though nothing I ever work on ever ends up on tape. I just found it to be really easy to learn, really interesting to look at, and the sound was really good. So
says, I'm a rock guy. I know who this guy is. Kramer. It's Eddie Kramer.
Yes.
He was the engineer that did Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin. Very, very prolific. All those albums from the 60s. That's who it is. That's his series. So I know who Eddie Kramer is. I use Slate Digital's virtual tape machines. So it's similar. Just because I've had it for years, man. I bought Slate stuff and I like it. But I think, it doesn't really matter what you use. I think Logic has one that's kind of built in, right? That has tape saturation, if I'm not.
It does. And it has Logic's built in. I don't think it has tape, but it does have a phase distortion.
Yeah.
That you can really just mix in really subtly and kind of gives you the same effect if you're really careful with it. But it's nice to just have a tape one. Some other people have some really good tape modeling. Isotope, all of Isotope stuff with the option to put some tape saturation on it.
Do you run that on your stereo out?
I do not run isotope stuff on my stereo out because it's very latency heavy, and
Okay.
so what I will usually do is once I get to the point where I'm exporting a master or stems, I take it out to a different project, and that's where I use isotope on it once it's already been
No, I mean
bounced.
the tape thing.
The Kramer?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, I use it on specific instruments.
Oh,
You
okay.
can use it on the full if you want.
Yeah.
I don't always want that. I just wanted a little bit of tape distortion on. Like
On
I
the
said, my
instrument.
particular use case was I had this like pulse going in the back,
Yeah, yeah.
and I just needed it to sound a little more
Gritty.
warmly analog.
Yeah, yeah.
And this really just warmed it right up. This is why I mentioned the phase distortion. This plus that Logic phase distortion gave it this really beautiful sort of analog sound that I really liked. So yeah,
Cool, man. Yeah, Eddie Kramer. Can't go
Yeah.
wrong with him. He's got. I think
It's a
he's got
great- it's a
other
great
plugins too. For
yeah.
Waves.
Waves has a million.
Yeah, yeah.
Of
I
him.
had a bunch of Waves plugin, and then they updated to the whatever, and I lost because you have to like re-update the license or something.
Mhm.
So I had to like pay like $400. I was like, screw that, dude. And because I bought
had
those
used-
a long time ago.
I had used something by them before, but I don't know what it is. I had an account there. But
Yeah,
didn't
I had a
see
bunch of
what
stuff.
I had ever bought
Yeah.
from them. But I just looked at this one because it was the one that was most recommended for this purpose.
I had the
and it was
Abbey Road stuff when it first came
Yes.
out. Those were really good. But when they moved their their plugins to a new thing, or they updated them, like I have to like re-register and buy them over again. It's like, what?
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it was weird. Like I had to like re-register.
You know
something.
who's like that? They've never done that exact thing, but I always find their system just super hard and annoying to deal with. Is Sonics?
I'm not familiar with them. I don't think.
They
What do
make
they
an
do?
Oxford Inflator. Is there one
Oh,
that I
no, no.
use, which is a really awesome plugin. It increases the apparent size / volume of a signal
Okay.
without actually increasing the dB. It's
Oh.
it's literally it's an inflator. It inflates.
Nice.
I'm not sure how it uses some sort of psychoacoustic model to go look at the demos. They're amazing. It's really good, but I always find their process just really annoying. To like every time when I bought a new main machine, like getting Oxford Inflator installed, which I remember the saga, and I had to like email them and like, hey, I don't what like I
Right.
own this plugin. What do I do? And like I had moved my iLock. It uses iLock, which is fine, but then like it wasn't working. It was a
Oh,
pain.
yeah.
But I love the Oxford Inflator. It's like the best. It's like I was willing to go through this, happily go through this.
Right. That's what happened. When I got my new Mac Pro, I went to go get all my Wave stuff, and that's when they did the switch. And like, yeah, if you want these ones, you have to pay our upgrade fee to get the new. I'm like, what? It's like I already
Mhm.
bought these, but they gotta
Yeah.
make money, so I get it. Well,
Well,
man.
what would I do unless I had 800 iLocks sitting around my house?
Right.
Some of which don't even work anymore.
I have
because
two,
like the
I
iLock
think.
one doesn't nothing uses it anymore.
Yep, I still have
it's
mine.
like I have iLock ones just in drawers.
Oh God, yeah, I have those too. I have one, and then I have the newest one, which I'm sure they're gonna update.
Because everyone can't just use the same the same USB thing. They have to
That's why I
all
like
have their
Logic,
own.
dude. I don't need no dongle or
Yeah.
anything, man.
right now.
That's why I
Do you
love
need
it.
a licenser for Cubase?
Yeah,
Yeah, you need it for Dorico.
just like VSL.
Yeah, Vienna needs it too.
But you can put it on the same one, which is
Yes.
nice.
At least they both use the same one.
Mhm.
But like, okay, so right now I literally have open a remote desktop session to a server I'm setting up, and I'm trying to install Vienna, and it doesn't see my e-licenser, and so now I'm gonna have to go
Ugh.
down and like replug it into my basement. It's like this is so stupid. This is so dumb. It's 2020. We know how to do this. No one's
Yeah.
gonna steal your.
It's just it's just that thing, man. But all right. I think that's
Cool.
gonna do it for this episode. Like again, like we
Cool.
said at the top, Chris will be on the next one. Like we said, he was at the production music conference.
PMC.
Yeah,
So if you're
PMC.
there and you happen to hear this and we release it on time, all of which is subject to doubt, say hi.
Say hi to Chris and let him know. But yeah, this was a good episode. Even though he wasn't here, we talked about some stuff, and then we'll hope next. I can't remember what the hell I was gonna say. Anyway, we'll just end it there. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Composing Made Simple podcast. If you want to find out more about us, head on over to composingmadesimple.com, where you can find more about me, Chris, and Curtis. Also, head on over to our Discord channel. There is a link on the website for you to join there. You can find me, Curtis, and Chris in there, a bunch of all other people in there. If you want to get your tracks reviewed, have a question about anything in your DAW that you use, even if it's not Logic, we have Cubase people in there, pretty much everybody. So head on over to composingmadesimple.com. Also, if you're listening to this on iTunes, be sure to give us a rating. That helps us with our search results and stuff like that. As always, thank you for taking the time to listen to us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.